Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have Edwin and Paul Dysinger. They're the founders of Seedtime, and we're going to talk about the non-GMO seeds that they work with and what they do. So, Paul and Edwin, thank you for coming.
Pleasure to be with you.
Yes.
Well, excellent. Well, if you wouldn't mind, tell me about your background. It's great that you're father and son and you work together. I think that's really cool. So, how did this idea come about, and what's the background of the work?
Well, my background is actually in public health, but I got involved in farming late in life. My brother had started a small organic farm and invited me to join him, and the idea was attractive to me, so we did. And I guess Paul was in high school then, and so he joined us as a major help on the farm, as well as doing his studies, and so we did that for a number of years. And then Paul has always had an interest in technology and computers and all, and he at one point decided that he needed to do his own thing.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it. So I worked with the family for multiple years on the family farm, like my dad just said, and then I really enjoyed teaching. And I had done some web work, so I started teaching gardening online. I branched off from the family business. And then through years, we grew quite a number of students. We had a membership. We did training videos, walking people step by step through how to grow their own food. And through that whole experience, it developed as we listened to the needs of our users and as we thought about our own experience with farming ourselves. We're like, there's got to be a better and easier way to plan your farm or garden. In our particular case, kind of even more starting on the garden side. And so that's kind of where Seedtime was birthed out of.
Okay. And what's the premise of Seedtime? What's the company about?
Yeah, so the premise is that we wanted to create a very simple way for people to easily visualize when to seed, when to transplant, when they can expect to harvest crops in their garden based on their current location. And one of the things that we found was difficult for a lot of people was just the whole the planning process, trying to figure out what to do, when to do it in the garden. And so it started we made this promise to our students, maybe a little bit rashly, that we would give them a weekly checklist of what they should be doing in their garden based on their location. And I think it was a bigger promise maybe than we fully understood at the beginning. And so,
so you created a guide that tells someone every week what they should be doing in order to grow whatever they want to grow? Is it a scheduling type thing?
Yeah, basically. Yes. Yeah. So we made this promise,
good.
And then we're like, okay, we promised our students this, and we started trying to figure out how we were going to deliver it. And they're just all the other garden tools and stuff online weren't that much of a help. it was going to be like this major undertaking to do this for all of our students. And so the long story short is that we ended up like semi-hacking another calendar program. Well, we didn't actually hack them. I'll just make that clear. But we worked together with them, and they were very kind to us. And we were able to use their system to create like a very basic prototype where people could click on the crop they wanted to grow, and it would just drop it into the calendar, and it would tell them when to seed, when to transplant, when to harvest based on their location. There were some major limitations, like they couldn't move those plantings around. But like when we launched that, like we've never seen gardeners so excited when we opened this up to our community, and we knew we were onto something. And from there, we're like, hey, we've really got to make this into our own app so that we could make it better, make it where people could adjust it themselves.
Can you specify, like, if you're growing in a greenhouse or outside in the dirt or in Walapini or different areas?
Yes, to a certain extent. We have on the app, you can set it up so that you're either outside or you're under 1 or 2 layers of protection, and that will adjust your timing a certain amount, particularly in the fall and winter.
Yeah, and that's like especially for winter gardening. So we have kind of a proprietary winter gardening algorithm. It's actually kind of experimental right now, but yeah, it gives that opportunity to kind of specify the level of protection on your plants.
Oh, cool. Okay. Can people choose hydroponics or aquaponics or soil, or different substrates to grow in? Like, what are a lot of the major factors that you can choose in the system to customize it to what you're doing?
Yeah, so we have people using it, growing in all different types. Like we have hydroponic users, we have people growing outside, we have people growing in pots. The main thing with Seedtime is the main customizable things in Seedtime right now is setting it up for your location - climate zone. So if you're growing in hydroponics inside, like you don't have any frost dates, right? You can grow all year round, growing under lights or whatever. And so you set up the calendar based on that climate situation, and you can plan out your garden plantings. Or if you're growing outside where you're dealing with other factors like frost dates, or if you're growing in a hoop house or something, you can set up the calendar based on those climates, and then you can work with it with planning your planting schedules.
Does it integrate yet with like local weather, 10-day forecast to warn people, a freeze is coming, do X, Y, and Z so you don't, lose your crop?
We don't have that integration yet, but it is, we're planning on it. In fact, we'd like to have a weather app embedded in the overall app.
Yeah, so Seedtime it's almost more than just like a garden planning app. Our vision is to create a suite of tools that seamlessly work together. So right now we have like the gardening calendar, we have a task list that automatically compiles. Like once you have your garden planned, then every week you just look at your task list and follow what to do. It's kind of like following a recipe. We have a journal. One of our future ones is weather, like was just mentioned. And our plan with weather is to have its own weather dashboard where people can set up their own customizable alerts. Like maybe they don't just want a frost warning, but they want to be alerted when the temperature drops below 50 degrees or something like that.
Or when the temperature goes over, 90 or 100 degrees, or, you can.
And then, along with that,
you tell people the temperature range in which to grow stuff. And, as you're talking, I'm thinking of all these things. Like, I don't know, let's say I'm growing tomatoes. You could have pictures in the app like, oh, now it's time to take out the meristems or whatever they call it. Now it's going to be in the flowering stage and you should see the following. And now it's in this stage and you should see that. Like with pictures in it would be really cool. Or, oh, you're having a problem with your tomatoes or potatoes. Like look in our library on common diseases and what they look like to match it up, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I like those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, we're onto those kind of ideas. You mentioned several that we hadn't thought of, which was great. And we
good. Incorporate them and use them. Manja, take it.
We're actively soliciting input from our users as we go, and already user input has colored what we're thinking and what we're doing, actually.
Yeah, we had a bunch of people that said that, hey, we really want a way to track our seed inventory, like the seed packets that we have on hand or have used and stuff like that. And we had like that wasn't even on our radar. So now we're going to build out an inventory section, where people can track that.
What about if I have, let's say I'm going to grow, outdoors and indoors, and I have like 100-foot by 3-foot bed available, and I choose the things I want to grow? Will it tell me, all right, based on the spacing, you could have 17 radishes and 20 tomatoes and 5 of this? And, does it also calculate that too with spacing and everything?
Yeah, that's the plan. So right now we started out with a calendar, which is perhaps a little unique for garden planners. I feel like a lot of garden planners start out with the layout of your garden, where people mark out their layout. And we kind of switched it up, and we started with the calendar, giving people just a clear plan of what to do. And then what we are building next is a layout planner, which would do exactly what you just said, where they can lay out in their garden. They can actually, draw out their beds, and then they can assign which crop is going to grow where, and it would be able to tell them how many of that crop is going to grow there in that space, et cetera, like you were just mentioning. But tie that back to the calendar so you could slide across your year, and you could easily see what spaces are being used at any time of the year and what spaces are open. So it would sync with their calendar at the same time.
Oh, very cool.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
What about the amount of time the work should take? Like for each week, you tell me do this, do that. Do you have a suggested amount of time to do it? And do you have any videos on how to do it if I don't know how to do it?
We don't make any time suggestions. That's kind of up to you. You have to know your situation and how much time you think that's going to take you. And there's so many variables to that. But,
it's extremely context based.
But we do have videos, instructional videos for each task. You can click on the task in the calendar or on the task list, and we have instructions or suggestions of how we would suggest you can do it,
what to do, how to do it, links over to video demonstrations showing how to do it. Because, like I mentioned earlier, I started with the garden training side. So I had built out this library of videos, training videos. So now we're merging the two, where you click on the task and it'll take you over to some of those training videos, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered if time would, I know it depends on the context, but if I'm going to have a week where I have to do a lot of work and I want to plan for it, what if the system warns me next week is harvesting, and they usually takes at least 5 minutes per plant or something like that. So just prepare next week. You're going to have to probably spend 4 hours on your garden instead of 10 minutes because there's a lot more work to do. This might be a helpful planning tool.
I like it. I like your ideas, man. This is great.
I'm good. Yeah. Well, if I'm gardening at home and I don't know, it's getting near to the holidays and I'm growing stuff indoors. What if I plant stuff and it's going to fall on Thanksgiving week where I'm supposed to have people in town, or I just don't want to do the work? Maybe I should shift it so it's a week later or a week before. I don't know. It just might help with people's planning schedules. Or, you're 4 weeks out from the growing season. If you don't have seeds, make sure you order them, to get them in time. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We are trying to help people with those kinds of things. And so, with the calendar, for example, you can, you're going to be gone for a week or 2 weeks, somewhere in the year. You could try to set up your schedule so that you don't have anything significant happening during that time while you're gone. And another thing that I thought would be kind of neat would be to maybe you're going to have a all the family over for a feast on Thanksgiving. Well, how about growing food for that? You can actually plant and schedule so that you're harvesting things right about that time so that you can have it available.
Okay. What about from a crop rotation or a regenerative agriculture standpoint? If I grow XYZ, this year, will it suggest, next year, don't grow that, grow this because the nitrogen is likely depleted, or, hey, put in a cover crop of clover to put more nitrogen into the soil for next season. Otherwise it looks like your soils may be depleted type thing.
Yeah. So as we build out the layout portion of Seedtime, like we were talking about earlier, that's one of the things that we're planning to build into it is like crop rotation tracking dash, where you could, whether it's like hover over the bed and it will show you a history of like what's been grown in there in the past, what families have been grown in there in the past, possibly suggestions like you're saying of, hey, you might want to follow up with this type of plant or something like that. All of that is definitely on the table when it comes to kind of our future release of layout.
Yeah. I guess another good one too is if you knew either wholesale and or market prices for what you're growing and you were able to multiply it by the number of plants and the expected yield, you might be able to even, plan out how much possible revenue there would be and then choose, all right, I'm going to grow this and I'm not going to grow that because it's too cheap this year, but I'll grow this instead.
Yeah. One of the things that our users suggested is that we have like a little, I don't know what you call it, little savings calculator or whatever, like cha-ching, you expected to save $500 with your garden this year, based off of what they're growing. But, more in line with what you're talking about, we have visions of building even more like farm integration tools into the future. And all of that would tie in with tracking expected revenue from crops and, versus actual revenue and all of that kind of data and analytics could definitely be built into it as well.
So we started this out with primary user in mind being the home gardener. And we've tried to make it fairly intuitive and with all the basic information you need so that you can be very, very green, have no experience gardening and we can basically hold your hand using this app through the process. You can all the information is there that you need to know in order to grow a garden without knowing anything to start. But in addition to that, from the get-go, we've had small farmers showing a real interest in this. And so we've added that on we're our target group now is home gardeners, homesteaders, and small farmers.
Well, what about I heard some plants you shouldn't grow together because they'll cross pollinate, and then some plants you need to let people need to know how to pollinate them. But I feel like I've heard, I think cucumbers and something else they'll cross pollinate and kind of get messed up. So do you have that in the app too, of what not to grow together?
Yeah, so what to grow and what not to grow together, oftentimes called like companion planting, etc. That companion planting is one of the biggest requests that we've had, and we're definitely planning to include suggestions on that. Yeah, the cross-pollination issue itself is actually more typically for if you're saving seed, like it shouldn't mess up your crop the year of. But further crops to get, like if you're saving the seed and then you plant that seed and grow it, you can end up with a mixed up variety on the far side. So yeah, when it comes to seed saving, we should definitely include like seed saving tips and how far apart to plant those, because if you're saving seeds from tomatoes, like you need to know how far apart to plant the different varieties of tomatoes so that they're not cross-pollinating, etc. Right.
I would like it to make the app seed saving friendly. We might just have, kind of a checklist of things that people would, you're growing tomatoes, you want to save the seeds. So, here's some things to think about as you're setting out. And, seed saving is very specific. For one crop, you need to think about, X, Y, and Z, but for another crop, you don't need to worry about those things. You need to think about A, B, and C. So it is very crop specific.
Yeah. And, what percentage of your crop should you allocate to, produce more seeds and let it go to seed for next year, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
I guess all that'll be in the works. Right?
Yeah, and you need to have a certain population size if you want to maintain viable seed as well. If you're
because you can't get it just from one, because not enough seed or not enough diversity of seed from different plants.
Not enough diversity in the genetics. If you don't have a large enough population that you're saving seed on, if you continue to save seed over a number of years, you'll have there's a term they use that's slipping my mind right now, but it's like inbreeding, and so you'll begin to lose significant traits.
Okay, interesting. So the seeds, the profile of the plants drifts over time if you keep planting, getting seeds. Interesting.
Yeah, if you don't have a large enough population. And again, for different crops, that population size is going to be different. For some, you'll have to have a large population. Other ones, it's not so important to have such a large, you can have a smaller population.
Okay. So I guess certain characteristics have been bred into the plants that we eat. Will they tend to go away if you just keep letting them go to seed and replanting them year after year? Do things like revert to a more unadulterated state with certain plants?
I mean, shift can happen with any variety over time.
Yeah, and again, it's because of not having enough genetic diversity. You started out with a small population, which limited your genetics there, and so and as you continue breeding and saving, if you continue only growing a small population, each time you'll be selecting a few of those that you're collecting seed on, and then out of the next generation, again, it's only a few that you're collecting seed on, and so over time, just as a matter of course, you'll be starting to drop certain traits, like it could be disease resistance or a flavor, or I don't know, leaf shape. There's so many different things but yeah, it could be affected. But the thing is, you'll just have a smaller and smaller genetic pool that you're working off of for the seed that you're saving.
Okay, that makes sense.
I believe the term is called inbreeding depression or something like that.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So what kind of feedback have you gotten from the farmers that you've been selling to, the home growers? Like, how much has it helped them, or how has it helped them? What are some good testimonials you got?
It's been really exciting to see people's feedback jumping into Seedtime. There's been a huge amount of positive feedback. Frankly, not a lot of negative.
No,
hardly any, if any.
I mean, you can go to Trustpilot and read our reviews there, and I'd recommend looking at the negative ones first, because they're really not picking at anything with the app. It's other issues, peripheral things.
So I'll just give an example. Like, I just did a little interview with Jody, who is one of our Seedtime users recently, and she said that she was able to plan her garden in 46 minutes. She said it probably saved her about 2 weeks of time trying to figure out what to do, when to do it, location, which is just really exciting to us, because it's like, one of the interesting things is we're creating this app, but we're wanting to, which is technology, right? But we're wanting to create space in people's lives to actually be able to spend more time in the garden with their hands in the soil. And so to hear our users that it's actually saving them time, so they spend less time on the computer doing all of this research and all this kind of stuff, and they can just put together their plan and then they can go out and do it. Lucy is an example of a small farmer. She said that it cut her time in half. She used to work all day, but now she just works in the morning, and she uses the afternoon to do other stuff on her farm or other stuff in her life. And I mean, to us, that's pretty phenomenal. So this
family of software is called what? What do you call it? Garden planning, or what's the type of software is it?
Yeah, we would call it a garden farm planner. Seedtime is the actual name, and right now it's a web app, and we're planning to build it out into like native phone and tablet apps as well.
Yeah, I like to call it a planning and management app, a garden or farm planning and management, because it's beyond planning. Planning is
Okay.
kind of at the center of it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. This sounds like a huge time saver.
Yeah.
I guess there's other softwares out there, but so what so far are you hearing from people that's unique that they really like about your software versus others?
In some ways, it's kind of hard to compare. We don't know of anything yet on the market that's really similar to Seedtime in the way that, like I said, a lot of garden planners have started out with layout, like you map out your garden space, and there's hardly anything out there that actually easily puts your garden onto a timeline calendar where you can see visually, like, oh, this is when I'm going to be seeding all of these things, this is when they're going to harvest, where you can drag the harvest to where you want it and it'll automatically show you the seeding date that you need to seed to get the harvest at that time. Like that type of functionality just has not, up until now, that we know have been very easily available to gardeners. So in some ways, it's kind of hard to compare with the other garden planners out there. There are other garden planners out there, and our experience with using some of them was that they were just a little bit clunky, a little bit harder not extremely intuitive. And, maybe you map out your garden but then was it actually making it easier to stay on track and actually saving you time in the garden and making it easier to garden? So that was our goal, was to make, in a nutshell, our goal is to make gardening and farming easier for people, to lower the barrier of entry. There's so many people that want to grow their own food, especially with everything that's happening in the world right now. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to just get in there and be able to follow a recipe, as it were, and just say, okay, yeah, this is what you need to seed this week. Hey, make sure to check because you should probably be transplanting now, etc.
I guess at some point, you might be able to recommend certain vendors in the platform. I know the ethics of it and everything, but I'm sure people are going to want recommendations from vendors at some point. So maybe that'll be a consideration too.
Yeah,
I want to do hydroponics. What kind of light should I get? Which brands are good? Which kind of seeds should I use? Which kind of nutrients? What kind of racks, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if people ask us, we definitely freely share our thoughts on the vendors that we've appreciated and experienced. And actually, just recently this year, we launched our own seed store inside Seedtime, so people can get seeds from major vendors like High Mowing Organic Seeds and True Leaf Market and stuff. And we expect to see more of those coming directly into Seedtime, so people can just purchase their seeds right there.
Do you guys have a microgreens module for people that want to do that?
Yeah, interesting that you asked. We have a microgreens training where I walk people through how to grow their own microgreens at home, and we are planning to we don't have microgreens schedules built out into the calendar yet, but that's something that we're going to be adding.
Hurry up and add these 500 features we just discussed.
I know, man.
You can't do everything, but there's a lot of really cool stuff to do. It's great. What's the subscription? Is it a subscription or a one-time fee, or what's the pricing and everything look like?
Yeah, we have a free level that is like an entry level that anyone can sign up with. We really want everyone to be able to start growing their own food.
We know a lot of the people that, especially when times get hard, a lot of the people that really need this don't have finances for it. So our goal is to really help people as much as possible. So obviously we have to make a living as well. It costs money to build this.
Right.
So there are options for people to upgrade, and we have subscription levels. Right now, at the time of this podcast, we're still in early private beta, and we do offer a limited time. People can jump in with a lifetime account, but there are subscription levels that people can, and basically it's based off of how many crops they're growing in their garden. So as their garden grows, then they can upgrade to fit the size of their garden.
Okay. So when will you open it up for the public to be able to buy, or can people still request to be part of the beta? Where can people go to follow up with you and find out more?
Yeah, so we'll share with you, or I shared with you guys, a link that you're welcome to put with this podcast, where they can jump in our private beta. We'll go ahead and invite your users to come on in. That's our gift to you guys.
Oh, cool.
it'll be a private invitation link. And then, I mean, when we go public, it'll just go switch over to the public link. But that's the best way to get in right now. Otherwise, if you go to our website, you'll join a waiting list. So use the link through here.
Okay. Well, very good. This is a great product you guys are working on. And yeah, it's definitely going to help, with possible food shortages and, all these big problems with supply chains. So thank you guys for what you created. It's very cool. And thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, appreciate you having us on, and it's our joy to serve.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.